It's time for SC250 Tuesday, bringing you information about Chesterfield County, the Pigg region, and South Carolina's role in the American Revolution. Our guest today is Chris Judge, who is our state archaeologist for the state of South Carolina and the former professor of Native American Studies at the University of South Carolina, Lancaster. Welcome, Chris.
Hey, how you doing, Jane?
We are wonderful. Chris, we want to talk about the impact on the Native American community at the time of the Revolution, and there is no person who is more perfect to do this than you.
I hope so. Thank you.
So tell us about the Native American community back in the 1700s in the Pigg region.
Yeah, after the founding of Charleston, the colonists began to realize that there were as many 50 tribes across what is now the state of South Carolina, and a number of them occupied what we call the Great Pigg River today. The Cheraw, the PD, the Waccamaw, the Winyah are all the main groups that were over in that part of the state. And, of course, at the very beginning of the Revolutionary War, the Battle of Sullivan's Island, which took place on June 28, 1776, there were a number of Native American soldiers who fought at that significant battle. They were part of John Alston's what they called the Raccoon Company, which was a company made up of 50 Pigg Indian riflemen. They were also joined by Waccamaw and Cheraw and Catawbas there under Colonel Daniel Ory, and, of course, overall under Moultrie at the battle there that took place. And so from the very beginning of the Revolutionary War, Native American groups were involved. Of course, on the eve of the Revolution, the Cherokee and the Catawba were trying to decide, who are we going to side with? And, of course, the Cherokee sided with the British, and the Catawba sided with the Patriots. And it's interesting to me that the Native Americans in South Carolina have served in every war from that time and before to the present. And so they start off there. And then, of course, we kind of pick them up again. There's a famous Catawba Revolutionary War hero. His name is Peter Harris. He joined early, was over in Georgia and then back in South Carolina. And he's wounded at the Battle of Stono Ferry, which took place June 20, 1779. He's hit by shrapnel. He goes home and recoups. But then he comes back, and he is with Thomas Sumter, the Gamecock, at Rocky Mountain, Hanging Rock, and Blackstock, the important battles that took place in 1780 and kind of turned the tide of the Revolution. And, of course, as we all know, so many more battles were fought in South Carolina than anywhere.
That is very interesting. I have learned something today because the Native Americans made quite an impact.
I think so. They tend to not really appear in traditional histories. For instance, the Catawba, we know of about little over 40 named folks who fought in the Revolution. And interestingly, that one group that we have the names for fought under a guy by the name of Captain Thomas Drennan, who was a Native American himself. And the names on this roster I'm looking down at are a lot of the same surnames that are on the reservation up in Rock Hill today. Brown and George and Ayers and Harris, all these names. Peter Harris is kind of interesting on a number of levels, and one of the reasons that I find him really interesting is that one, he at the Battle of Stono River in 1779, he captured a rifle, which he kept with him his entire life, and would bring it out when people asked him about his Revolutionary War service. He got 200 acres of land for his service up on Fishing Creek, but it wasn't until October of 1822 that he actually petitioned to get his pension. And I won't read the whole thing, but he writes for his pension. He's assisted by a senator from from Charleston District. He says, "I fought against the British for your sake. The British have disappeared, and you are free. Yet from me, the British took nothing, nor have I gained anything by their defeat." And I think the British did take a lot from the Catawba and his people. You hear about the great stories of how in 1780 and 81, Thomas Sumter is camped out on the Catawba Reservation. And you hear about how the Catawba drove cattle down and brought food for the troops. What you don't read, and my colleague, Dr. Brooke Ballard at the University of Tennessee wrote a book on this, it's the Catawba women that come down and bring the cows, the cattle, and the food and feed the troops. Their men are away fighting, and they are defending their village, and they are, keeping everything at home going. When the British approach, the Catawbas take the women and children to Virginia, and when they return after the war, their houses, their villages have been burned to the ground by the British. And so we tend to think, when people went back to places like Camden and Charleston, there was destruction, but there wasn't the entire village burned down. And so I think the role of Catawba women is certainly overlooked in the Revolution.
I certainly think that is too. Can you expand a little more about that? What did they do, these gallant women?
Well, their men are away. The northern tribes up in the northeastern United States were constantly at battle with the Catawba. The trading path, from Virginia to Catawba was an important route of trade, and so the northern Indians would come down and attack. The Catawbas were greatly reduced. They were probably only around 400, 500 people at the time of the Revolution, whereas the Cherokee were much larger, and the groups in the Northeast were much larger. When their houses were burned, so was their food. So, for instance, the Cherokee in 1776, at the outbreak of the war, what we call the Cherokee War. So the towns over in the northwestern corner of South Carolina are attacked and burned by a guy named Andrew Williamson. He burns 13 towns in South Carolina and twice as many up in North Carolina. And this is in July and August. So not only do they burn the towns, they destroy the food supply. And if you think about it, that's harvest time. When you're putting up all the crops out of the field in there. So the Catawba women were, back to them in 1780, their supplies are completely cut off. The war disrupts their lives, and they have to keep their home fires burning, as it were.
Wow, what gallant women these were! Tell us where we go from there.
Well, the Catawbas, they're fighting at most of the main battles up into 1781. They're very hard to find in the historic record, but they are at the major battles. We don't have them at Camden in 1780 per se. We know there were natives involved there, but we can't find them really in the history of that battle, as you might expect. But Blackstock is an important one for Thomas Sumter, and Peter Harrison and the other groups are there. And then the latest one that I can find them is the Battle of Utah Springs, September 8, 1781. And we hear about the Patriots, the white folks, and all their glory and everything, but we don't tend to hear about them. They're not in the records, and as they should be. So we're sort of gathering up the pieces, the little bits, fragments of the elusive history, and trying to write a history for Native people who are not really well represented or marginalized in traditional histories.
And you're working on that now as our state archaeologist?
Well, it's not one of my focuses, no. When I was at the Native American Studies Center, I did a project for, this is at least 10 years ago or more, right around 2015. I did a project for the town of Cheraw, and they were building a kiosk down at the boat ramp on the PD River, and they wanted to put some information in on, who the Cheraw were. And I could only really find that the Cheraw were there for about 20 or so years in the early 18th century. But regardless, the name of that town stuck. I also I worked on a project, a long-term archaeological project on the Pigg River that had evidence from the Ice Age to World War I, but no Revolutionary War evidence. But I had the opportunity to work with the state-recognized Pigg Indian Nation, which are centered up in McCall, on the other side of the river from everybody over there in Cheraw, and was surprised when I learned that about this. The Raccoon Company and the fact that there were PD fighting in the Revolutionary War. And so began to kind of study the history of the PD, their relations with the Cheraw, and downriver with the Winyah and the Waccamaw. You don't find a lot of records of these folks in the historical record. In the Journals of the Commissioner of Indian Trade is one place where you find a lot of evidence, but that only goes from about 1710 into the 1750s or 60s. So we're at the time when the Revolutionary War is about to start there, and then they're few and far between records of them.
Well, they may not be in the history books, but the Native American, they made quite an impact on the American Revolution. You've been listening to SC250 Tuesday, bringing you information about Chesterfield County, the PD region, and South Carolina's role in the American Revolution and the Native American impact of the American Revolution. Brought to you by SC250. Our guest today has been Chris Judge, our state archaeologist and former professor of Native American Studies at the University of South Carolina, Lancaster.